Hi and welcome to the second part of Spoilers and Speculation. This time, are we the pawns of the old gods? This is going to be based very much around the Whispers of Il'gynoth, a boss clearly serving the old gods, in fact N'Zoth in particular, in the Emerald Nightmare. Now, the old gods, remember, are there to corrupt Titans. They're, in this case, to corrupt Azeroth, to turn it into a being of the void as opposed to growing to be a normal Titan. This is why Sargeras began his Burning Crusade. He wasn't opposed to the Titans at all. He was one of the Titans, very much one of their friends, but he saw the Void as being this thing that you can't stop. The Pantheon themselves, the other Titans, found that they couldn't defeat the old gods even on Azeroth when they found it. I mean, Amonthol, I think it was, pulled one of them straight out there, Y'Shaarj, and it left a gaping wound, which they had to tend to. Eventually became the Well of Eternity, and now it's the Maelstrom after all that naughtiness. So all they could do was try and contain the old gods. They couldn't actually remove them. This is a big problem. And Sargeras saw this and thought the only way is to completely destroy all these worlds so that they can't actually corrupt them, because he saw no way of defeating them. And maybe he was right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at some of these whispers. At the time they came out, we didn't have very much information. We still don't have enough to be able to say on a lot of things, but we have more information now. So can we use this to predict what's going to be coming up in the next expansion? So, of his random whispers, here is the first. Flesh is his gift. He is your true creator. This one's quite straightforward. Most of the mortal races of Azeroth are not flesh by design. The Titans did not design us this way. Humans, for example, were Vrykul. The old god's corruption eventually gave us what is known as the curse of flesh. Dwarves came from earthen, which we can still find in places like Uldaman. Gnomes used to be useful, mechanical beings. So they're right. Il'gynoth is correct in saying that really the old gods in many ways are our creators, because we would not have naturally descended from these beings. That was not part of the Titans' plan. We have deviated from that plan, and various Titan constructs have not been best pleased with us ever since. The next one, to find him, drown yourself in the circle of stars. Well, who is him in this case? Probably N'Zoth, or maybe a subsidiary. Maybe it's someone between in authority N'Zoth and Il'gynoth itself. Drown yourself in the circle of stars. We've long supposed that it's underwater that would need to go. It wasn't in Cataclysm, as people may have thought, in the underwater Vashj'ir zone there. In the circle of stars, what does that evoke to you? Well, stars and moon sort of think of night elves, temples of Elune perhaps, or other night elf temples. Maybe underwater now, Naga ruins. So it could possibly relate to an area of the next expansion. The King of Diamonds has been made a pawn. Now, this is the really interesting one for me. The King of Diamonds surely has to be Magni Bronzebeard. There's no real doubt about that. Has been made a pawn. So what is it that Magni Bronzebeard's doing? He is communicating with Azeroth and passing on Azeroth's fears to us. And what is it Azeroth fears? Sargeras. Especially now with the new scenario, Argus has honed into view. Sargeras is close now. Azeroth fears for herself. Fair enough. But Magni has been communicating with Azeroth since before Argus honed into view. Has he really expressed any great fear of the old gods? Has he been turning our attention to the old gods? It's really been about the Burning Legion, hasn't it? Is this an indicator that Magni is indeed the pawn, as maybe we are, of the old gods, in that they're distracting us from the old gods' threat and focusing us entirely on the Legion as if it's the only threat to us? The next one, the Lord of Ravens will turn the key. Clearly has to be Khadgar. I don't really think there's anything to be decided there. He's got the Raven form now with the Great Staff. He's the inheritor of Medivh's legacy. He's not the Guardian itself, but it's got everything else that goes with it. Turn the key. The key that unlocks their shackles. This comes onto one here, which is 5 keys to open our way. 5 torches to light our path. Has to, of course, be the Pillars of Creation. Pillars of Creation, which we have used to unlock the Tomb of Sargeras. The Lord of Ravens will turn the key. But does it do something else? The Pillars of Creation are not simple. They weren't created to form seals around the Tomb of Sargeras. They were created to reshape Azeroth itself. They're much more powerful than simply sealing up a hole through which endless demons spawn. So the old gods would very much like these things assembled. We have now assembled them. Do they even need to take possession of them? It casts me back to an old Doctor Who story, The Key to Time, this one, for those who may know that. The fact that the pillars of creation have been assembled, is that enough for the old gods to be able to use that to unlock themselves? So by Khadgar using these things to do what he wants in the Tomb of Sargeras, as he actually released the old gods. The boy king serves at the master's table. 3 lies will he offer you. Now the first part here is really interesting. The boy king has to be Anduin Wrynn, there's no real doubt about that. Serves at the master's table, the master being N'Zoth, surely. Now what's the table for in this case? Must relate to feeding. So Anduin is feeding N'Zoth. So then you think, so what is this? Is he doing something? Is it poor decisions actually playing into their hands? And then you come to something Il'gynoth says when you engage him. Come, little ones, savour your fear as we feast upon it. So he feasts upon fear. Now it starts to make a bit more sense. Anduin Wrynn is plagued with fear. Not moral fear. He's not afraid for his life. But he's afraid of failing his people. He's now been newly placed on the throne very suddenly, even though he lives in a world of violence and even though his father is constantly putting himself to the hazard. He didn't really believe that his father would die this suddenly. He's been placed on the throne, didn't really expect it at this time, and he's full of doubt, full of fear. And maybe it's that doubt and fear that is feeding N'Zoth. The 3 lies will he offer you, I don't think is in the game yet. The only 3 I can think of with Anduin is when you escort him through Stormwind City, he does stop 3 times at citizens and listens to what they say and comments on it. And it's all very self-deprecating what he says. Are these the lies he offers us? Because he's talking directly to us when he says these things. I twisted my head around it and tried to make it fit, and I'm thinking, I'm not really sure this is it. So maybe this is something to come. It's not really probably something to come in Legion, or maybe it is. It's certainly not coming on Argus. Anduin plays no part on Argus. There's nothing data mined in terms of dialogue or anything like that. We've not seen him there. So it'd be very surprising if he played any part on Argus at all, whether it's in just 7.3 patch or the raid that's to come out later on. But maybe when we return, they'll have some further role, or maybe it is for the next expansion. Now the next one is the most vexing. Her heart is a crater and we have filled it. Now the her could be one of 3 in my mind. And I'll start from what I think is the least likely to the most likely. Sylvanas is the least likely of the 3 that come to mind for me, because her heart is a crater evokes this sense of lack of purpose. And Sylvanas' main purpose was to get revenge upon Arthas, and then when became the Lich King, and potentially the Scourge at large. Once the Lich King was defeated, that purpose was removed. She was not best pleased that she didn't play a direct role in it either. So she attempted to kill herself, but then she agreed to come back at the behest of the Valkyr. But the reason she agreed to come back was because of that purpose, to lead her people. And now she's war chief, and that's fairly inexplicable to my mind. But nonetheless, it's a thing. And she seems to have taken to it that she now regards all of the Horde as her people. She actually seems to have taken to leadership and shepherd of those people. So I don't think that she has lacked purpose, really, for any great length of time. So although it could be her, I don't think it is. The second possibility is Jaina. Now, obviously Jaina is without purpose at the moment, so that is quite clear. So easily the sort of thing that the old gods could be corrupting. Then you think to yourself, well, is Jaina even coming back in the near future? Because the last time we saw her, she went off in a huff. She doesn't even control the Kirin Tor anymore, or Dalaran. But there was a hint from Blizzard a few weeks ago. They tweeted some artwork for Jaina that they'd had made for BlizzCon. So something to do with Jaina? Is it something for when we come back after Argus? Is it something for the next expansion? Is it both? Is she going to get a brand new story? So it's all very compelling now. Maybe, and people keep talking about the corruption, oh, Jaina's a dreadlord, all this sort of thing. Maybe not an agent of the Legion. Maybe an agent of the old gods. Maybe it's a corruption story. Maybe not. The thing that makes me doubt it's Jaina is the very thing that a lot of people, I suspect, think makes it certain. And that is the specific use of the word crater. Her heart is a crater. The crater of Theramore Isle, for example. Because that is what turned her from... Her original purpose was to unite the Horde and the Alliance. That's what she desperately wanted to do. As soon as Garrosh mana-bombed Theramore Isle, that was out the window. She was very anti-Horde. Even though all of the ills done against her in Dalaran and on Theramore Isle have clearly to everyone been the result of Garrosh directly, not the Horde. And even the Horde teamed up with the Alliance to unseat Garrosh. So everyone else sort of realises Garrosh was the architect of those destructions, except for Jaina. She won't have it. So whatever it is, she's very anti-Horde now. But it's too close to the mark for me, this crater thing. It's too near the nose. Given that all of these are supposed to be riddles and they're not supposed to be soluble, at the moment at any rate, they're supposed to be there to throw us off the scent. It seems to me to scream deliberate red herring. For that reason alone, I don't think it's Jaina. For everything else, I would think, yes, this is really compelling. But just that makes me think, no. No, they're doing this deliberately. So who else could it be? The final one is Azeroth herself. Because that's what the old gods are there for. Her heart is a crater. Crater, an absence of something. Well, it's developing. The Titan soul is supposed to be developing. It's an embryonic Titan. So the old gods, their purpose is to corrupt it whilst developing and try and turn it into something else. What they now seem to be suggesting, if this is true, by the way, it says, and we have filled it, past tense, as if they're quite happy that they've now got a proper hold on Azeroth, that they are now turning it into a Dark Titan, or a Void Titan, or whatever you want to call it. Shouldn't really call it a Dark Titan because that's Sargeras' title, isn't it? That's a different thing altogether. So then on to the next whisper. At the hour of her third death, she will usher in our coming. Now, as an Alliance player, I thought this was obvious, but there has been some doubt on it. The obvious one is Sylvanas, because as an Alliance player, like myself, I think to myself, okay, so she was killed by Arthas originally, before he became the Lich King. So that's one death. Then, at the fall of the Lich King, she threw herself off Icecrown. So that was the second death. She sort of came back. Valkyrie took her place in Oblivion. So we're just waiting for the third death. But unfortunately, it appears she's already had a third death, which I don't know about. But I seem to recall in one of Noble's videos talking about this. So that means she's already had third death. So you think, so it can't be Sylvanas then. But then you think, okay, some tricksiness here. Because who's whispering this? Il'gynoth, servant of the old gods. Maybe from Il'gynoth's point of view, Sylvanas hasn't had 3 deaths. Maybe when Arthas killed Sylvanas Windrunner, that's not counted as a death, but a birth, because it was the birth of Sylvanas, the Banshee Queen. So, maybe she has died twice, and we're awaiting this third death. Maybe a spicy bit of family drama at the hands of Illyria when she finds out that Sylvanas is a Banshee and comes back to Azeroth. Maybe, who knows? But maybe that's going to be the pre-expansion event, and that Sylvanas will face a third death. Now it's possible. Now if you think in those terms, you think, The only other candidate, as far as I can tell, and this doesn't make a lick of sense, would be, who else has died twice, is female, Onyxia. So, you know, we've killed Onyxia twice. And I don't mean when they brought her back for that new thing, but I mean Onyxia in vanilla form and Onyxia in undead form in Blackwing Descent, wasn't it? And so that would be the only other one. And of course, the Black Dragons do have that link with the old gods. So it's not completely impossible. But the fact that she's not currently walking the earth makes me doubt it. So I'm still going to go with Sylvanas, and that there's some tricksiness about the count of her deaths. Next one, I think, is a complete red herring. From the earth he draws strength. Our earth, our strength. I don't think this is Magni Bronzebeard at all. The reason is, obviously he is communing with the earth. He's communing with Azeroth. But that's all he's doing. This thing about drawing strength, he's not drawing strength, is he? What strength is he drawing? He's there. He can't even take care of them. We constantly in the scenarios with him have to take care of mobs and do his fighting for him. You almost imagined that he was more useful at fighting when he was a normal dwarf instead of this crystal thing. So I don't think it makes sense for it to be Magni at all. So then you think, so who could it be? Because what it's talking about is clearly corruption. This thing about from the earth he draws strength. Our earth, our strength is clearly an indicator that by doing so, they're being corrupted. So who draws strength from the earth? Shamans. Is this the return of Thrall? because Thrall has been very much emasculated at the moment. He, first of all, as soon as he stopped being War Chief, I mean, okay, they bigged him up a bit in Cataclysm with him taking on the role of the Earth Warden, effectively. But then he's sort of fallen from grace. Then we nicked his hammer in Legion, and he's like, within 2 seconds of picking up, he's like, oh my goodness, you are already far more powerful with this hammer than I ever was. It's like, I'm just holding it at my side. What are you talking about? So he's a completely pathetic figure now compared to his former glory. But maybe this is the return of him. But then you think to yourself, oh no, but what? A corruption of Thrall? So he becomes powerful again, but he's going to be corrupt. Are people going to buy a corrupted Thrall? Does it necessarily even mean he'll be corrupted? Maybe it's an attempt at corruption that doesn't work in the end. Is it Thrall at all? It's the one that makes most sense to me, but it's also the one that it's one of those things. It could be anything, but it's the only thing that makes sense to me. Then the final of the random whispers. Its surface blazes bright, masking shadows below. Now, the second part of that is what I think gives us the clue. Masking shadows below. They are the shadows, the old gods and their servants. Masking it means we're distracted from it. So this is clearly something that's distracting us from the threat of the old gods. Indicated by Malfurion himself at the end of the fight, where he says, no doubt Xavius and his ancient master delight that so much of our attention goes into fighting the Legion. Their insidious shadow seeps into our world, distracting us with whispers and doubts. So there's no doubt in my mind that this is to do with a distraction away from the threat of the old gods. So what is the surface that blazes bright? Could be a couple of things. Could be the surface of Azeroth, blazing bright with the fires of war. We're constantly at conflict with someone, burning Legion at the moment. It's been other things as well. Each other, Horde and Alliance. All of these things distract us from the old gods. We only ever tackle the old gods very infrequently and only when one of them rises. So we had Cthulhu in vanilla, we had Yogg-Saron sticking his nose in, we had the Twilight's hammer and all that stuff in Cataclysm with Deathwing coming back. But when they die down, we sort of forget about them. But they're ever present, they're always there. But we're always distracted by them. So it could be that. The thing that makes me wonder about that is her heart is a crater and we have filled it. Now, if that refers to Azeroth, and that's a big if, but if it does, then referring to Azeroth as a her there, but it's an it here, its surface blazes bright, why not her surface blazes bright? So then I'm thinking, if I'm right about that being Azeroth, and I may not be, then this suggests it's not the surface of Azeroth. So maybe it's the surface of Argus. Remember, a lot of these things, even though they're talking about what's happening now and what's happened, some of them are predictions, they're prophecy. So even though these whispers were made before Argus honed into view, maybe it was talking about the coming of Argus. Because that surface blazes bright, and it's definitely distracting us from the old gods, because we're looking in the opposite direction. The old gods beneath the ground, beneath us. We're looking up into the sky. People running, screaming around Dalaran, for example. Now it starts to make more sense. Its surface blazes bright, masking shadows below. We are fixed entirely on Argus, the burning Legion, the seat of their power, the focus of our endeavours, and we're completely distracted from what the old gods are up to. So anyway, those are my thoughts, which I'm going to condense into some predictions for the expansion, which could all be completely wrong, of course, but I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.